Today's teaching is the first in a series of teachings that I'm going to be giving on the medicine Buddha practice. And I am basing these teachings primarily on a book by Thrangu Rinpoche, and the title is Medicine Buddha Teachings. So he starts out with talking about practice in general before he gets into going through the actual puja line by line. So I'm going to start with that. He begins by talking about motivation. And this is an important point for any teaching that you are receiving. Even if you're reading a book or watching a video, our motivation is important. And so it's important to understand the instructions that we are receiving are the basis for our practice of the Dharma. They're the basis for our progress on the path, and ultimately for our attainment of Buddhahood. And underlying all of that is the motivation to be able to benefit all sentient beings. So if we can start with this altruistic aspiration to be doing whatever activity that we are engaged in a way so that it can benefit all sentient beings, either presently or in the future, this is excellent motivation. And have the additional motivation that when you're receiving instructions on how to practice, that you will practice them so that you can liberate all sentient beings. And I'm emphasizing here, you will practice them. We do not attain enlightenment through reading and just being motivated to liberate all sentient beings, that we need to actually practice. They talk about listening and hearing, contemplating, and then sometimes they'll use the word meditating. Sometimes you could use practicing. It's the same. The idea is that we need to listen to the teachings, and reading the teachings would be included here. Watching videos would be included here. Then we need to contemplate them. We don't just try to parrot them and just be able to repeat them word for word, but not understand the meaning. We need to understand the meaning. You might say we need to take them into our experience so that we understand these teachings at a heart level. And then we need to practice them. Now, you might wonder if it's contradictory to have this bodhicitta motivation and also want to be free of illness. That can seem a little selfish. Well, Thrangu Rinpoche explains it this way, that in order to be effective in benefiting others, we need to have excellent meditative absorption, along with insight and the realization that results from that meditative absorption. And it is stable practice that causes this with a basis of physical and mental health. If we don't have that basis of physical and mental health, it's very difficult to have stable practice. So it is not selfish to want to be free of illness or be at least affected as little as possible by any illnesses that you are experiencing. So with a physically and mentally healthy body and healthy mind, we will be free of many obstacles to practice. We will be able to be diligent in our practice and be able to cultivate meditative absorption. And the goal of all practice is to attain Buddhahood. And this is the same for Medicine Buddha. The goal of Medicine Buddha is not just health, physical and mental health, but it is ultimately to attain Buddhahood. And that can be done through practicing Medicine Buddha. So you could say that through practice, we are cultivating the potential to benefit others. And of course, our practice goes with us into our next life and the one after that. So any practice that we engage in the present will be of benefit to us and beings in our future lives. So next, in his introduction here, he talks about Vajrayana practice and blessing the environment and blessing all beings in it. And so he talks about pure and impure perceptions. But first, I want to talk a little bit about blessings. The Tibetan phrase is Jinlap or Jinjilop. Lama Yeshe, the translator, he sometimes translates it as to engulf in splendor, quote, to engulf in splendor, unquote. And I believe a literal translation of Jinlap is splendor wave. So what this means is that blessings are the experience of bliss or other benefits that result from one's devotion in opening oneself to the Guru, the Buddha, a Bodhisattva, or any other meditational deity or yidam. And this can be done in meditation, in Vajrayana practice, and so forth. So this practice is done to bless the environment and bless all beings that are in it. Now there is pure and there is impure perception. And Thrangu Rinpoche discusses this in terms of our 8 consciousnesses, our mind, and our body. They're all closely interrelated at this point. So our body is the container for the mind, and the mind supports the body. Vajrayana practices, well, they employ visualizations and chanting and mantra. They do eventually affect the body. Our body and our mind, again, are not separate. They are interdependent, or the Karmapa has used the word interconnected. And I think that kind of says it a little more clearly in this case about the mind and the body. They are interconnected. So these 8 consciousnesses, the first 5 are directly related to the body. And these are our sense consciousnesses, our sense organs of taste, touch, smell, sight, and hearing. All of these, we have bodily organs that you might say are receptors, sensors. And so our 5 sense organs and sense consciousnesses are aware of objects in terms of sight, form, in terms of hearing, sound, and so forth. And through the practice of Vajrayana meditation, these sense consciousnesses are transformed from impure to pure. And we experience things in their pure form when that happens. Another way of talking about this, we're all familiar with the term pure land, like Chenrezig and Amitabha's Pure Land of Dewa Chen, where all sound is the sound of Dharma, and all beings are enlightened beings. And that's what is getting at here, is that it is the way ordinary beings perceive things that is what creates samsara, that an enlightened being sees deities and sees a pure land. And it is not that one is different from the other, it's a matter of perception. There is ultimate reality and relative reality. Thrangu Rinpoche says that relative reality is an illusion, but within relative reality, there are good illusions and there are bad illusions. The bad ones are the ones, of course, that are full of suffering. The good illusions is when we are progressing on the path towards enlightenment. In absolute reality, all is illusion with no good or bad, just pure realms and deities. And so with Vajrayana practice, all Vajrayana practice, We are trying to change our perception from impure to pure. And if you look at practices like Chenrezig that probably most of you are familiar with, after the mantra repetition is completed and you dissolve the visualization and you re-arise, when you re-arise, all sound is the sound of Dharma, the sound of mantra, Om Mani Padme Hung. And it's a pure land, and all beings are deities. Here is a quote on page 5 of Thrangu Rinpoche's book that explains this. Quote, because the consciousness pervades the experience of its object and the experience of the organ itself, if the consciousness is transformed, or if one's modes of experiencing of consciousness is transformed into pure appearance, then the appearance of the objects and also the organs themselves will become pure. So this is the process. Of course, it's a lot more difficult to do this than it is to talk about it or read about it. But that is the process, is that we are trying to transform impure appearance into pure appearance. And we're not trying to create a fantasy, because it is the impure appearance that is the fantasy. The next consciousness is the sixth consciousness. This is a mental consciousness. And it is a kind of like a, you might say a warehouse, because it collects, or maybe the cloud might be a good way to put this. Although my knowledge of the cloud is not that good, and I might be on shaky territory here. But anyway, the 5 sense consciousnesses that I just talked about, they send information to the 6th consciousness, and then the 6th consciousness collects it and makes all kinds of judgments about it. The 6th consciousness is called the mental consciousness, and it generates and experiences all the emotional states and thoughts about them. So this is where our kleshas are, where joy, sadness, compassion, faith, suffering, moods, and so forth. And this experiences, this affects our experience through our 5 sense consciousnesses. That when we're sad, it's difficult to find joy in our own life, no matter what happens. When we're happy, it's much easier. If we get angry, suddenly everything changes. And we find that there are problems all over the place, that we're surrounded by people that make us angry and so forth. Jealousy transforms our experience. So whatever is happening in the 6th consciousness, whatever emotion we're having, or sadness or faith or whatever, it is transformative. Needless to say, if we are feeling compassion, then that permeates how we feel about information coming in from our five senses. And this is my favorite story about how quickly the world that we reside in can change based on our emotions. This is a story about a man that I've known for a very long time. He moved out here in this rural area to get away from Minneapolis, St. Paul. And he likes nature. He moved out here for that reason. He likes being out in a natural environment. And he has a small business in a little town here in this area, a little town of probably 500 people and shrinking, could be 300 people by now. And well, he has a car and a motorcycle. He also has a bicycle because he likes to bike in the summertime. And sometimes he would ride his bicycle to and from work in the summer. And so he was riding home from work one day, and there in front of him in this country road was this bag of trash. And he went ballistic about people not giving a darn about the environment, about other people's feelings, and just driving through the country throwing trash out the window. As he rode up close to the bag and got to see what was inside it, he realized very quickly it wasn't trash, it was fresh groceries. It had probably fallen off of the back of a pickup truck that was going down the road. And so instantly when he saw that, his anger was gone, and now he was happy because he had found a bag of fresh groceries, and it was his. It was now his bag of groceries. So he stopped his bicycle, grabbed a hold of the bag, got back on the bicycle and started to pedal home. And quickly he realized that the bag was too heavy and bulky for him to ride the bicycle. So he stopped, thought for a while, and then decided to hide it in the brush on the side of the road so that nobody else would find his bag of fresh groceries. And then he rode home quickly because he was worried about someone finding it and taking it. Got home, got in his car, drove back, drove up, parked, got out, went into the brush, found the bag, now was happy again and relieved. He was no longer worried. Got in the car and drove home with his bag of groceries. So he experienced anger. He experienced happiness when he realized it was groceries and it could be his. And of course, that was attachment and desire. And then there was a little bit of worry and paranoia that he would lose his bag of groceries, that someone else would find it when he was gone. And then when he got back with the car and went to look for it, he was relieved and then happy again. So this bag of groceries has done nothing. It just lay there. All of these different psychological states and all of the feelings that go with it. And there are going to be bodily feelings that go with anger. There's going to be bodily feelings that go with strong attachment and so forth. This was affecting his body as well. All of this was a result of him projecting onto that bag. And this is how we create our impure world that we live in. Now, these consciousnesses are all unstable. The five sense consciousnesses are inactive if there's not an object of that sense consciousness. If there's nothing to see, the sight sense consciousness is inactive. Same thing with hearing, taste, smell, touch. The next consciousness is a stable consciousness. It's the seventh consciousness. And this is also at a very subtle level that most people are unaware of. And the seventh consciousness is a subtle, fundamental misapprehension of an existent self and the fixation on this existent self. Thrangu Rinpoche says it's ignorance, and it's based on more ignorance. It is sometimes referred to as klesha mind, and klesha means poison. The idea is that these poisons of the mind, which are aversion and aggression, anger, through things that we find that we dislike that are unpleasant, and then attachment and grasping and desire to what we find is pleasant, and then indifference to what we find we're fairly neutral about. And then there also is jealousy, thinking that other people have a better deal than us. And then pride, thinking that we're a much better deal than other people. These are the basic five kleshas, or five poisons of the mind. And so this is called klesha mind, the seventh consciousness. It holds on to an inherently existing self, and it also holds on to a self of external phenomena. So there are four basic mental events of the seventh consciousness, and these happen quickly. It's very subtle, and we are almost never really aware of it happening. It's been happening in lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. We are just can't imagine it being any other way, in fact. So the four mental events are: one, conception of an I. There is an I that is inherent and independent, unchanging. Then the next mental event is attachment to that conception of an I. I am important. In fact, I'm the main deal here. These are my groceries. The third mental event is ignorance. And this is that the I is not seen as false. We believe it. We buy into it 150%. And the fourth one is pride, and that is I am important. So number one is this conception of an I to begin with, an I that is separate from others. Then 2 is the attachment to that conception of an I. The third is not seeing it as false or fabricated, created, and seeing it as important, that I am important. More important than all the other people out there. So to kind of sum this seventh consciousness up, it's always present. It does not disappear sometimes. It's always present. And interestingly enough, it's neither virtuous nor unvirtuous. Before we start through our practice dissolving the seventh consciousness, the seventh consciousness is going to be the basis of our virtuous behavior as well as our unvirtuous behavior. When we do our practice, let's say of medicine Buddha, we are going to be thinking, I am doing the medicine Buddha practice. We might be motivated to do this practice so that we can be of more benefit to other beings and so that we can be healthy and then have a more stable meditation and so on and so forth. But it's still, I am the one that is doing the medicine Buddha practice. So it is the basis of both virtuous and non-virtuous behavior. So it is the basis of all our actions, based on where we are right now along the path. Now, the way Vajrayana practice works, because it works at this seventh consciousness, it works on the seventh consciousness, is that the path is one of gradually abandoning our self-fixation. And we do this in Vajrayana by deity visualization, visualizing ourself as an enlightened being, in this case, the medicine Buddha. This replaces our sense of a solid self. The deity visualization is made out of light. It's not solid. It's like a reflection in a mirror. So this helps reduce our fixation on an I, a solid I, and fixation on our body. And this then gradually reduces the power of the kleshas, and this reduces the power of the seventh consciousness. In Thrangu Rinpoche's words, quote, "This causes you to experience greater and greater well-being." Now, merit accumulated with klesha mind operating is called defiled virtue or defiled merit. And at the first bhumi, which is the experience of emptiness, when you are experiencing emptiness during meditation, the seventh consciousness is not present. You have this brief experience of egolessness, but then it will reappear in post-meditation. And as you travel the path from the first bhumi to full Buddhahood, this seventh consciousness becomes unstable and frequently is missing sometimes. And when you reach the 8th bhumi, it by this time is gone completely. This reminds me that I should give a talk on the 10 bhumis sometime. Karmapa is considered at the 10th bhumi. He manifests like a 10th bhumi bodhisattva. So since so much of the Dharma is emphasizing removing this misapprehension of a self, deity practice is a very important tool in doing this. And again, the reason why we visualize ourselves as an enlightened being like Medicine Buddha is not to convince you that you are nothing, but it is to convince you that you are not your ordinary self. The 8th consciousness is the final consciousness. It's called the all-base consciousness or the storehouse consciousness. And this is where karma and habitual patterns, mental conditioning are stored. Our memories are here too. And so again, traveling the path, getting out of samsara involves weakening our bad habits, purifying karma, strengthening our good habits, and accumulating good karma. And again, by visualizing ourselves as Medicine Buddha, our innate qualities of body, speech, and mind will increase and develop. By visualizing ourselves as Medicine Buddha, we will gradually, little by little, come to see ourselves as an enlightened being. Gradually, our fixation on ourselves as being an ordinary being, as being simply our body, gradually this is reduced. This reduces the power of the 7th consciousness, and it reduces the power of the kleshas. Impure perception is weakened, and our pure perception is strengthened. So this is a very important point about what's going on when we're doing a deity practice or any Vajrayana practice, is that we are weakening these habitual patterns, our karmic conditioning, purifying karma, and so forth, and developing positive habitual patterns. Eventually, we have to even let go of our positive habitual patterns. But little by little, one step at a time. So again, remember that what we see is based on our emotional state, as that story about the bag of trash shows. So we need to realize that what we are presently seeing is an illusion, that it is based on our emotional state, and that with pure perception, we would see things very differently. So here's a final quote. And then I'm going to open it up to questions. And this is on page 149 in his book. This is in the question and answers section. Quote, that basically is what is meant by impure perception or appearance, and pure perception or appearance. But the difference between these two states, the same person in basically two different moods, is very slight. Well, that is the principle on which it operates. It can go much further than that. If you can imagine a mind that is completely pure of any kind of negativity whatsoever, what that person would experience is what we would call true, pure appearances, and a mind that is filled with various sorts of negativity experiences, impure appearances.